Ruyter says that Eskom will be able to expand its capacity now that the power utility has some funds available. And this, he said, in a virtual media briefing yesterday to update the nation on Eskom's outlook regarding the current blackouts. The briefing is a second to be held in 2 weeks as South Africa continues to be immersed in bouts of rolling blackouts. The Ruyter has been at the receiving end of the frustrations of groups such as the Black Business Council calling for his resignation. Eskom reduced the rolling stage 4 blackouts to stage 3 at 5 a.m. this morning, and a further downgrade to stage 2 is expected at 5 a.m. on Friday. Now, the power utility hopes to lift the rolling blackouts by Saturday. To help us further unpack the country's energy woes, we're joined by energy analyst Adil Nchabeleng. Thanks so much for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
So, Adil, let's start with the Eskom CEO, Ruyter. He says that Eskom needs capacity between 4,000 to 6,000 megawatts to add to the grid. And this, of course, expecting to come on sooner rather than later, the country would hope. But given what is happening, given what we are seeing, the breakdowns and just the inability to get this grid stable, are we expecting miracles here?
Well, I think they spelled it out. They clearly said that there is not going to be the end of load shedding. The priority is to build, new capacity, which is going to be contracted out, which is going to take years to happen. So clearly we are actually headed for something that is very visible now, that there is no commitment to actually bring in lost capacity, which is in terms of power stations that are currently being shut down and that the others that are currently unmaintained. So we have a situation whereby Eskom has openly said, unless government, it's like really holding a gun against government to say, unless government goes out and procures an additional 4,000 to 6,000, it takes a long time to get that process outgoing. So we're still looking for another 5-year minimum in South Africa before we could even cross over the load shedding saga that we're sitting with, which is a crisis to the economy. It is devastating lives. It is devastating businesses. And not only that, jobs are being shed just because government refuses to take decisive action. The turning around of Eskom to bring in about ensuring that the power plants are working optimally requires a dedicated, focused team of people, particularly a CEO as well as a board that is dedicated. Right now, we can see the board has already made its own strategic decision as well as its strategic objectives. They are not interested in repairing the problems that occurred and are occurring within Eskom, which is to bring in power stations back into operation. Instead, they're talking about moving away from the production of energy from coal to renewables. And that is why Andre emphasized that his most important objective when, Sophie Mukwena asked the question, he said that his most important objective was to make sure that he has 131 billion reasons why he must go to COP26 instead of ensuring that there was power supplied in South Africa. So you could see the reasoning, very arrogant, and no change in attitude, but very stern to show that they are not interested in turning around Eskom. They're going to keep creating this problem to exist and not face and fix the problem.
Let's unpack that. When you say they are going to keep, having this problem exist, how so? We look at these power stations and quite a few in this fleet, we are told are basically at the end of their lifespan. We see these breakdowns occurring at regular intervals. And how do we justify that? And what should be the solution to this problem?
The solution to the problem has always been there. They're just refusing to apply the right processes to doing it. There has not been in Eskom up to today no proper right maintenance, no proper prioritization on setting aside money to make sure that power plants are actually maintained and refurbished. And the notion, again, to say that power plants have reached an end of life is actually completely ridiculous. There's no such a thing in the world. Most power plants are running, in some of them, 80 to 100 years. Power plant is just a location where you put an infrastructure. That infrastructure, over a period of its own operational lifespan, gets renewed. Maximum is over 15 years. That entire operation gets renewed, particularly on the key components. So the renewal and refurbishment is not a new thing. When you refurbish something, you bring in new components, technology, instruments, everything that operates it to make sure it's up to standard. So What we're told is there is no commitment to actually bringing back lost capacity, which is currently being shut down, currently being unmaintained, currently not given, its proper prioritization of, technical maintenance and care. So it's very clear that the leadership in Eskom has committed itself to all other objectives, but to ending the saga and crisis of load shedding. Telling people that plants are old means nothing in any sense. I've just explained that 15 years, every power station goes through an entire refurbishment and total renewal, rebuilt to that point, because you have to continuously do the exchanges of technology, equipment, and all lot of things to bring it up to stage. So it does not even justify that. It's a non-starter in any technological space and energy space to say that power plants have reached an end of life. Why? Because they want to move away to the newer technology. We've made it very clear from the beginning that from our analysis is introduce the newer renewables, but they should not be a burden up. Eskom has a legislative requirement that says that it needs to produce electricity at the most cheapest rate and affordable to the society and community. The current alternatives coming into grid right now don't have the capacity. If we say 100 megawatts of renewables, for instance, brought into the grid, only 25% of that, which means 25 megawatt, will only be delivered at the time when it is produced. There is no reliability on it. You cannot budget on it in terms of being given into a base load grid environment. So we're sitting with fundamental, issues that there is a misunderstanding and there's a misinformation. What they did yesterday was actually to explain very clearly that they are in a quagmire situation. They are in between confusions at the leadership level, and nobody wants to take the bait to say we are wrong at the stage. Our priority should have just been putting lots of money, ensuring that we refurbish and we renew the power plants, and we bring back that lost 6 to 8, 1,000 megawatts that are currently missing in the system, which is due to power stations that are not operating.
So when you say put in lots of money, where is that money supposed to come from? The Ruyter, for example, mentions that some municipalities have not played their role in things like implementing load shedding, or those who did that did it at a fraction of what was expected. So that, in addition to the fact that we know that many people are either connected illegally to the grid, many have bridged their electricity connections, and then some, of course, are simply not paying for what they are spending. So where's the money supposed to come from, given the rampant corruption that we've seen at Eskom, the cost overruns that we've seen, that the consumer in the end is picking up the tab for with these exorbitant electricity prices?
In terms of the money is already allocated on a budget level. When you generate 200 billion and your priority on that 200 billion is to only spend less than 4 billion of that to revive and maintain your plant in terms of its maintenance, it shows you that there is actually a disjuncture in how management is operating. They should have been spending minimum of 20 billion annually to ensure that maintenance, upkeep, and care is actually prioritized within Eskom, even more, and reduce all these other things where they are overly paying on coal and all the other contracts that they have. But they haven't done that. So the money is there, which is required for maintenance and plant refurbishment. But the priorities are not in place. That is why you have the current war whereby there is a chase for a dream, which will only happen when South Africa has reached a certain level of electricity provision, when you have already given the minimum mandatory grant electricity. The fact that people in South Africa are doing all of this other connections and everything illegal, municipalities are not paying, it shows you that we are a developmental country that is plagued with poverty-based issues. People in communities require electricity, and if Eskom is not providing, most of them take it the law into their own hands and do their own connections. It's a known thing. And Eskom has not worked harder to make sure that electricity is accessible and people are given proper metering and are actually able to be given, they can pay the money that is required with regards to the basic electricity that they should be receiving. On the other end of it is municipalities. We spoke about 2 years about the issue of municipalities. At some point, something was done where there were agreements with municipalities. Why didn't the Eskom executive management follow up and demand that monies be paid by municipalities? Because at the end of the day, ratepayers are paying their monies towards municipalities at actually prepaid level at most cases in South Africa. And some of them are paying at post-paid level, but the money is sitting with the municipalities. So who is to be blamed when municipalities are not respecting the repayment of the monies that they are actually, of the energy that they are receiving from Eskom? That is an executive management issue, and that has to do with the leadership, again, back to the whole issue. So we are burdened by issues that are created and systematically perpetuated within the system to ensure that there is a continuous problem within Eskom and that energy does not rise. Remember, when they talk about energy demand, there is no more energy demand in South Africa. We are dropping the consumption of energy on the basis that Eskom is continuously pushing down people from utilizing electricity and making sure that they use less of it. Which company in the world goes and tells customers that use less energy?
A company that doesn't have enough electricity to sell. But just to finish this off, Adil, Andre de Ruyter says he was appointed by the board. He will not resign on his own accord. What is your view of his performance so far in handling this particular matter? Is there anything that he can do to further alleviate the problem at this stage? And would you say the board is keeping him with the view that he's actually doing a good job under the circumstances?
I think, Andre, the current scenario whereby it's an embarrassment, one, because we're sitting with a racial challenge right now. Firing a white person in South Africa is an anomaly, and particularly within government. They're all scared to deal with the issue. And the fact that the Eskom chair is a black person, educated means nothing, but the fact that they come from an apartheid era whereby they never were able to confront the issues of racism and on the head on. You know, the fact that Andre is now promoting a culture in South Africa that says if you're white, you're above any reproach and you cannot ever be recalled on any level shows that we're not even touching the speck of it when we say we're a non-racial country. Any individual in South Africa, black, white, Indian, colored, when they fail to become the responsible people in an executive position, we should respect the fact that they have failed to deliver on their capacity and should be relieved, irrespective of color. But in this case of Andre, we are seeing a very clear color contrast that says a white executive CEO cannot be fired even if he is misperforming and if he's not prioritizing and is not doing his job. Instead, we're told that they need 4 to 6,000 megawatts, and if that doesn't happen, they're going to still continue with the load shedding and not prioritizing maintenance. So this has now become a racial issue. It has now become a disjuncture in terms of our project of democracy, of non-racialism, to show that black executives at the board and management level are incapable of removing a white CEO. That is what it is today, and we should live with the realities that we are actually regressing on the democratic project. Instead of dealing with issues at the level of its technical level, now race becomes a trumping card to removing a person who's incapable. 18 months has already passed. The first 100 days would have shown us that Andre is committed to us turning around Eskom. He has not been able to do that. And it is not a personal issue. It is a technical matter. People are all affected. We are all affected.
But to be fair, Adil, would anyone be able to turn around Eskom in 18 months?
It was turned around in 18 months. You had capable CEOs. You could hate Brian Molefe, you can hate Coco Matsela on what they did and how they worked. But they turned around and they stopped load shedding. So yes, there are many executives, there are many CEOs that could turn around that institution and prioritize what needs to be done right. But currently you can see that they have put certain people as stooges in there, and Andre is one of them, who is just performing a particular function, and the function is so that they can drill down and close and shut down Eskom's capacity to become a main supplier of electricity in South Africa.
And so caught between a rock and a hard place are we as South Africa, because the revelations of corruption at that point, as also evidenced not only at the parliamentary inquiry that was led, but also at the Zondo Commission around what has happened at Eskom and how the entity was literally looted. What do we do with that?
That was a false lie. The Zondo Commission has not even produced a single credible evidence leader who actually came up with anything that said, this is what happened. And I'm not here to defend individuals, but on the basis of what was actually created as a picture of corruption within Eskom, they failed to uphold it at the Zondo Commission. All we had was the fact that there was a contract here and there, but none of it was actually followed up and actually produced evidence. So the corruption issue that Brian was corrupt as well as Coco was corrupt, failed in terms of its own testification process at the Zondo Commission. By now, if that was the truth, they would have been among the people that have been arrested. Nothing has happened because there is no credible watertight proof mechanism. But the issue of Eskom has got nothing to do with really executives at that level. It has to do with competency and the level to prioritize.
We saw the likes of McKinsey repaying money because that was an admission that corruption had taken place, that they were paid for things, services that were never rendered. So to say that corruption is a red herring is not quite true, because there was corruption that was taking place at Eskom, and it's not to say it has stopped or it wasn't there previously, but it has happened. And this is in part why Eskom finds itself where it is financially.
Oh, wonderful. Do you remember that after Andre came into operations, there was a lot of allegations of 15 billion, there was allegations of 5 billion, of 5 contracting companies that were actually involved. There were many other allegations. There's still allegations of coal contracts that were actually taken away and given to certain individuals. These things have been happening in his leadership. So what are we talking when we say there was corruption, when it only applies? As I said to you, this is no longer about the fact that there is no capacity to turn around Eskom. It is about the fact that racially now we have agreed that white people are untouchables when it comes to be removed from an operation that requires a simple turning around. Make sure that electricity works. If Andre had turned around and made sure that there is a provision of electricity, most of us wouldn't care what they're doing, as long as they're keeping the lights on. The only thing it touches us as society, civil society, organizations on the ground, is when it's affecting the ordinary lives of people and starting to affect the GDP and the production of, proper goods and services, and really the livelihood of people in South Africa. So we really are not interested in the intricacies that has to stay. The reason why Andre is not capable and fit right now has shown the arrogance that he is racist. And I've heard of stories. We even have some of the issues, that allegations that were put upon him of being racist and removing certain black suppliers, replacing them with white companies and everything. And they're bringing back a culture that we've moved away from as South Africa, post-apartheid.
Okay.
That it is not correct to do things in a racial manner.
We have to leave it there, Adil, and it's very interesting. Energy analyst Adil Nchabeleng discussing Eskom, South Africa's energy problem and the desperate situation that the country finds itself in. And I think, it's a question of this issue being politicized, being racialized, and all the while, all that South Africans really want is for the lights to remain on at an affordable rate. But with that, let's bring you the news with Leanne.